Hello, and welcome to My Week in Baseball. I'm your host, Phil Estruth Harrison. You're listening to Season 2, Episode 13. All episodes are available in both video and podcast format at myweekinbaseball.com or subscribe on YouTube at My Week in Baseball. And thank you to Rose Petal Studios for the artwork and logos created especially for this show and website. You'll find Rose Petal Studios on Instagram at rosepetal_studios. Also, thanks to Brunjo Productions in Nashville for our intro music. Learn more at brunjo.com. Well, today we've got an action-packed episode for you, including a Cincinnati Reds rookie looking for proof that Shohei Ohtani is actually real, and a bit on Ohtani proving his realness in more ways than one. How the Brewers scoreboard staff learned not to tempt home run fate. The Tigers set up a Miggy Hotline to share your stories. A Max Scherzer, Justin Verlander showdown in Texas. And something you will not want to miss, answering the question of who are the 10 best pitchers in the history of baseball. Of course, we'll also have a trivia teaser and a timely limerick for you, our baseball limerick, along the way. So let's get right to it. We'll start with the trivia question. Today, what Hall of Fame outfielder at age 39 became the oldest player to hit for the cycle back in 1991? Hint, he played most of his career for two teams, one in Southern California and a New York team. We'll have the answer and a clue for you later in the show. Next up, is Ohtani real? On a night in late August in Game 2 of a doubleheader, Ohtani doubled, and while standing on second base, Reds rookie sensation Elly De La Cruz was playing shortstop and walked over to second and gave Ohtani a little touch, a little poke on the arm. And when asked about it later, De La Cruz smiled and said he just wanted to make sure that Ohtani was real. I love that. Well, he proved his realness going 2 for 6 in that doubleheader with a double, a homer, and 2 walks. And that's what happens when you're having the best season in baseball. On the pitching side, Ohtani has 10 wins, 5 losses, a 3.14 earned run average, and 167 strikeouts in only 132 innings, which is nearly 11 and a half strikeouts per 9 innings. Wow. Now, I know he's not pitching anymore due to an elbow injury, but still, what a season on the pitching side. On the hitting side, and a recent oblique injury has caused him to miss several games, but he's still been mashing the ball all season to the tune, as of today, September 8, 2023, as of today, Ohtani leads the league in triples, home runs, walks, on-base percentage, slugging percentage, on-base plus slugging, OPS plus, total bases, and intentional walks. Wow. So good to know that he actually is real. And thanks, Elly De La Cruz. That was just a fun moment on that game in the doubleheader. Next, a quick update on what we know about Ohtani's elbow injury and his unknown future. So his agent recently, after a couple of weeks of speculation on what might happen when he injured the ligament in his elbow and on his throwing hand, there was certainly worry that he would need a second Tommy John surgery. He had one a few years ago. His agent says that he will have some kind of procedure, but it may not be a traditional Tommy John surgery, and that the injury is not to the part of the ligament that was injured in the past. So it's a different injury. Sounds like it's not as severe, but will require some type of procedure, which I think means some kind of surgery. The agent also pointed out, though, that he will be ready to hit as of opening day 2024. So they're trying to let his possible suitors as a free agent know they can at least rely on him as a designated hitter going into next season. It's still unknown what exactly is going to be done to the elbow and how long of a recovery timeline that might be. It certainly wouldn't be surprising if he did not pitch at all next year. I guess it does depend on the procedure. Currently is still batting for the Angels, although, as I said, due to a little oblique strain earlier this week, he has sat out several games, so we'll see what that means for the rest of his season. But looks like he's headed for a certain most valuable player award. It will be his second MVP in 2 years, and honestly, he would have won 3 years straight if not for Aaron Judge breaking the all-time American League home run record last season. Now, speaking earlier of Elly De La Cruz, the Brewers scoreboard personnel recently learned not to tempt fate. So if you're not familiar with him, Elly De La Cruz is a much heralded rookie for the Cincinnati Reds. And you'll notice if you're watching on YouTube, you'll notice I'm wearing a traditional Cincinnati Reds cap today. It's the solid red body with the Reds logo C in white, with a little bit of dark blue, navy blue, kind of black trim. The brim of the cap is also a navy blue black, and the button on the top is matching that same kind of navy blue black color. Anyhow, De La Cruz has a great combo of both power and speed. So far this season, he has hit 11 home runs and he has 27 steals. Now, that may not sound super impressive until you hear that he wasn't called up until partway through the season. He's only played 80 games, basically half a season. So that would easily translate to 20 plus homers and 50 plus steals over a full season. Elly De La Cruz is already a star and is going to be a superstar in the coming years. Somebody definitely to keep an eye on. But back to the Brewers. So De La Cruz came up in the first inning and sent a ball deep to center field. And only a terrific play at the wall by Brewers outfielder Joey Wiemer prevented it from being a home run. Snagged away, robbed of a home run in the first inning. So the next time up, a couple of innings later, the Brewers scoreboard team, in their infinite wisdom, decided to tempt fate by putting something on the scoreboard that they may have later regretted. So this next time up, his second time up in the game, the scoreboard had a little bit of what you might call a snarky comment, which said in his previous plate appearance, he almost hit a home run, but didn't. What was De La Cruz's response to this? In his second trip to the plate that game, he clobbered the next pitch more than 450 feet for a no-doubter home run. Perhaps the Brewers scoreboard team will think twice before adding taunt-worthy comments in the future. Next up, the Tigers will be celebrating Miggy's amazing career. Well, they have been, of course, all season. But as we approach the latter parts of the 2023 season, with the final weekend of the season coming up around the end of September, there is now a Miggy Hotline established by the Detroit Tigers. And the idea here is that you, as a fan, can call or text with your memories of Cabrera, maybe a tribute, something special about him and what he's meant to you and to the Tigers over his tenure. So some of these tributes will be chosen culled out and chosen and selected to be included in ceremonies over the season's final weekend. So I encourage you, if you do have something you'd like to say about Miggy, what do you remember about him? What's made him special to you in Detroit? I mean, for me, it was 2012 when he won the Most Valuable Player Award for the Tigers and led the Tigers to the World Series. In fact, at Halloween at our office Christmas party, I dressed up like Miggy and had a shirt with his number and name on it on a little baseball bat, and even a cutout of his face that I had for a little mask. So that's my memory and tribute. But I'd like you to contribute yours. So the way you do that is you call or text Miggy24, MIGG 24. 24 is his number, of course, Miggy24. You can call or text Miggy24 to this phone number, area code 313-471-2424. I'll give that one more time, 313-471-2424. So you can call that, or if you're texting, text MIGGY, Miggy24. Great. So thanks. And please, add your tributes. What do you remember about Miggy? Or post it in the comments on myweekinbaseball.com or on YouTube. And YouTube again at My Week in Baseball. Next up, Max Scherzer versus Justin Verlander. So earlier this week, on September 6, 2023, the Rangers had a home date against the Astros, trailing them by just 2 games for the division lead. Scherzer of the Rangers versus Verlander of the Astros, 2 certain-to-be Hall of Famers who had pitched together earlier in their careers for the Tigers, and earlier this season, both were on the New York Mets before being traded away in July when the Mets fell out of contention. Anyway, what we had hoped would be a dynamic pitching duo turned out to be an absolute clunker, where the Astros won 12-3. Verlander completely dominated the game, scattering 4 hits over 7 innings, giving up just 1 earned run to raise his record to 11 wins, 7 losses with a 3.23 earned run average. Scherzer, on the other hand, got hit hard in 3 innings, giving up 7 earned runs. His record fell to 12-6 with a 3.91 ERA. So even though this particular contest wasn't close, didn't end up being the fun one to watch, although if you're an Astros fan, and I am quite a big Justin Verlander fan, he's still pitching amazingly well in his age 40 season. But they're both, Scherzer and Verlander, having good overall seasons after starting out a bit rocky in New York earlier this year. So that leads us to today's Blimerick, our baseball limerick that we have every episode. And this time it's a tribute to Scherzer and Verlander. So here we go. Teammates they were in the Motor City, and again with the Mets, they both did play. In Texas, JV won the duel against Max. But was it cool? Not so much. 'Twas a rout all the way. And now, on to something you won't want to miss. The top 10 pitchers in baseball history. So I published a blog article about this recently at myweekinbaseball.com. And please read that article for more detail than I'll cover today in the podcast. But here's basically what happened. A week or so ago, I was at a coffee group, a few friends that I get together with regularly, and we talk about anything that happens to be going on in our lives. And although the rest of the group really aren't particularly sports fans, they know that I really am a baseball geek, and they try politely to include me in their conversation. So one of my friends asked, well, Phil, who do you think the very best pitchers in baseball history are or were? Who are they? And I said, whoa, that's a good question. And I'm going to do some research and I'm going to get back to you. So that bought me a week to figure out how to even go about answering that question. I mean, you could just go by WAR, look up wins above replacement, but that seemed too easy. And I wanted to test my research and evaluation skills a little bit to see what kind of answer I could come up with. So I did ask them if I should include players who had some questionable past, as far as were they playing completely by the rules, specifically Gaylord Perry and his infamous doctored baseballs, a terrific pitcher. And also, Roger Clemens. Do I include someone who at least was accused of steroid use? But I did. I decided to include them. And what about players from way back in history, from the late 1800s, from the early 1900s? What about the Negro Leagues? One of my friends specifically asked me how I thought Satchel Paige would rank. So I decided to cast as wide a net as possible and to include a number of different statistical categories. So the way I went about this was I did look at wins above replacement as one category. For those of you who may not know, it's basically how much better was this pitcher over the course of their career than a replacement level player. A replacement level player essentially means a AAA player, or you might even think of like a 4A player, a player who's a little bit better than AAA, but not quite good enough to hang around in the major leagues, kind of a replacement level player. So that was one category I looked at. Another was total innings pitched. Now, certainly that would favor people who had a longer career and those who pitched in a pitching rotation, maybe a 4-person rotation instead of a 5-person rotation, who would get more starts. But it's also very valuable to the team to be able to throw a lot of innings and to save the arms in the bullpen. So to me, that felt like a good category. Another one is adjusted ERA plus, sometimes simply called ERA plus. And this is a great way for comparing pitchers across different time periods, because what it does is it shows how much better or worse your earned run average was compared to those of your peers. So the base level is 100, and if your ERA plus is above 100, then you're better than your peers. If it's below 100, then you were worse than your peers. But that way you kind of compare time periods. The fourth category that I looked at was win probability added, abbreviated WPA. And this just means that if you assume an average team, what is the probability of this pitcher increasing the number of wins if he pitched over his whole career for an average team? So those are the 4 categories I used in my evaluation. I did consider a 5th category, which is called Cy Young Share, which is a measure of the votes that you receive for the Cy Young Award during your career. But that really skewed the results to recent players, because the Cy Young Award has only been out there since 1956. So I looked at that, but I decided to drop it because it didn't seem like it gave a fair representation across the broad spectrum of baseball history. And I do want to thank a call out and acknowledgement to baseballreference.com. That's baseball-reference.com for the statistics. They provide terrific statistics on these categories and many others. You can look up almost anything you could ever imagine at baseball-reference.com. So thanks to them for the statistics. So now, how did I determine this? So I took those 4 categories I just talked about, and I looked at the top 50 pitchers in each category. That way I felt like I'd cast a pretty wide net. So I actually came up with 107 pitchers across different pitchers who were in the top 50 across those 4 categories. So basically trying to come up with the top 10 out of roughly 100 pitchers. And one of my findings across all those categories was that ERA plus certainly was useful in finding pitchers who were quite valuable historically, who didn't show up under some of the other categories or didn't show as well. And definitely there were a large number of players from the late 1800s, the early 1900s, and the Negro Leagues. More than half of the top 20 pitchers in ERA plus were actually from those periods. So my thought is that they must have been so much more dominant in their eras against the competition. They were so much better than the average pitcher that really made them shine in the category of ERA plus. And specifically wanted to look at that to see how players like Satchel Paige would rank. He's actually 7th in ERA plus. There were 2 other Negro League players, Bill Foster, who was 1st, and I love this name, Bullet Rogan, who was 2nd in ERA plus. You know why he had the nickname Bullet. This guy must have thrown an amazing fastball. Anyhow, what I found was that the statistics for the Negro Leagues are incomplete. There aren't statistics available from every game across the entire careers of those players. So even though they show well in ERA plus, they don't show up in the other lists much. And that hurts them in the overall rankings. So I'm certain that these players, Satchel Paige, Bill Foster, and Bullet Rogan, would do better if we all had complete statistics from these guys who were certainly amazing players. So that said, Satchel Paige tied for 43rd in my overall ranking, so he did make the top 10. He tied with John Smoltz for number 43. So that gives you a comp, and that's knowing that we don't have all the stats for Satchel Paige. Bill Foster was even better. He tied for 36th with Curt Schilling. So again, another prominent recent name, Schilling. And so if Foster was anywhere close to that good, and we know we don't have all the stats available, wow. And then finally, Charles Wilbur Bullet Rogan came in at number 38 overall. So really, we're talking about the top 10, but I wanted to specifically call out those guys. And in a future blog post, I'll list my full 100. So that gets us to the 10 best pitchers in baseball history. I'm going to run them backwards from number 10. So drum roll, please. Tom Seaver at number 10. Pitched for the New York Mets and the Cincinnati Reds primarily, won over 300 games, 311 with a career 2.86 ERA. Coming in at number 9, Pedro Martinez, who pitched from 1992 to 2009, mostly with the Boston Red Sox, but also with the Montreal Expos and New York Mets. Career wins were a little lower, 219, but an amazing career earned run average 2.93, and he did quite well in the statistical categories. Coming in at number 8. So the first 2 guys, Seaver and Pedro Martinez, were both right-handed. Coming in at number 8, left-handed pitcher Randy Johnson from the Seattle Mariners and later the Arizona Diamondbacks. He also had 300 career wins, 303, 3.29 career ERA. Coming in at number 7, another lefty, Warren Spahn, who played in the 1940s through the 1960s with the Braves, the Boston Braves, and then the Milwaukee Braves. He won over 360 games, 363 wins, 3.09 career earned run average. Coming in at number 6, old-time player Cy Young, after whom, of course, the Cy Young Award is named. He pitched from 1890 to 1911 with teams you've probably never heard of, the Cleveland Spiders and the Boston Americans. He has the most wins in baseball history, 511 recorded wins with a career 2.63 earned run average. Coming in at number 5, and this is the highest rated left-handed pitcher with the nickname Lefty. This is Lefty Grove, who pitched from the 1920s into the early 1940s with the Philadelphia A's and the Boston Red Sox. Won exactly 300 games, career ERA 3.06. Number 4, back to a right-handed pitcher, a recent one. If you're an Atlanta Braves fan, you will certainly remember him, Greg Maddux. 355 victories, 3.16 ERA for Greg Maddux. Number 3 on my top 10 list of best pitchers in baseball history. So we're in the top 3 now. I guess you'd call this the bronze medal. Grover Alexander. Grover Cleveland Alexander pitched from 1911 to 1930 with the Philadelphia Phillies and the Chicago Cubs, winning an amazing 373 games with an ERA of 2.56 for his career. And coming in at number 2, and this one may be a little controversial, coming in at number 2 for the Boston Red Sox and New York Yankees, Roger Clemens. Roger Clemens pitched from 1984 to 2007, won 354 games with a 3.12 ERA. And yes, he did pitch for Houston. He did pitch for some other teams. And who's number 1 on the all-time list of the all-time best pitchers in the history of baseball? And we're talking about starting pitchers. I did eliminate relievers, anyone who pitched more than half their games in relief. I did eliminate from the categories. But the number 1 pitcher, according to me, in baseball history is Walter Johnson, who pitched from 1907 to 1927 for the Washington Senators. Career victories, 417. Career earned run average, 2.17. So how did he finish number 1 against all these other great pitchers? It really had to do with his rank in the 4 categories that I looked at. Each of these categories was worth 1/4 of the total value I assigned. So in rank by WAR, wins above replacement, Walter Johnson is number 2 overall. So that gave him a lot of points in my evaluation. In ranks by total innings pitched, he was number 3. In rank by ERA plus, he was still in the top 10 at number 10. And in rank by win probability added, WPA, he came in at number 16. So top 10 finishes in 3 of the 4 categories and a top 20 finish in the 4th were enough to push Walter Johnson into the number 1 spot in my rankings. So certainly you may have your own feelings about how you would go about evaluating the best pitchers in the history of the game. I'd love to hear about that. You can post a reply in the blog or on YouTube. Again, myweekinbaseball.com or on YouTube at myweekinbaseball. And in the future, I will publish the full list of my top 100 pitchers in baseball history. So now, with that, we're on to the answer for today's trivia question. I will repeat the question. What Hall of Fame outfielder at age 39 became the oldest player to hit for the cycle, a single, double, triple, and home run in the same game, back in 1991? Hint, he played most of his career for 2 teams, one in Southern California, which was the Padres, and one in New York, which was the Yankees. I'm going to give you an additional clue, if that wasn't enough. He is most famously known for accidentally killing a seagull with a ball thrown in Toronto. In fact, maybe that should have actually been the trivia question. Who is most famously known for killing a seagull with a thrown ball? Of course, it was accidental. There's a whole incident about it. I may talk about it in another episode. He was taken into custody by the Toronto police for cruelty to animals after the game, even though it was clearly accidental. His name, you may have guessed it by now, Dave Winfield, the oldest player at age 39 to hit for the cycle. So that's all for today, my friends. Join us next time, because honestly, what can be better than talking baseball? As always, I'm your host, Phil S. Truth Harrison. We'll see you next time on My Week in Baseball.